The first step is to have all the components that are going into the computer laid out in front of you. Note my parts are laid out on an anti-static surface area. I've also taken the abundance of screws that will be needed for this assembly and placed them inside labeled plastic baggies as to not lose them. My toolkit is also within reach, allowing minimal movement when putting together the desktop. Before proceeding to start the assembly, make sure you have your ESD strap attached properly to any metal surface of the computer, and make sure your mat is also attached similarly. Once I'm ready to go, I start with my power supply. This isn't a hard component to install. Remember that placement is important. The wires should be inside the computer and the fan should also be facing in towards the computer. I put the power supply in first as it's big and bulky. It can be a pain to put in if other components are placed in before. The power supply slides in easily. Once it is in place, the 4 screws at the back that hold it are attached so it doesn't move. Notice my ESD strap is still on during this step. There's still the possibility that the power supply can be damaged even if you aren't directly touching anything on the inside.
But the day will come.
I take the time to move any loose cables into areas where they won't be in the way. I choose to move the power supply cables where extra hard drives and CD drives can be installed, since these are some of the last components to be inserted and attached to the computer. They won't be getting in my way anytime soon. Any of the other cables that the desktop case has are moved to the side. I find this to be more convenient when putting together the rest of the computer. Our next step is the motherboard. One thing to remember when putting this bad boy in is to hold it by its sides as much as possible. You're trying your best not to touch the actual surface of the motherboard as you can damage it. To place the motherboard in properly, take the end with all the slots and place it in line with the back of your case. Everything should fit perfectly and allow for easy placement. Also, make sure all the mounting points are aligned to be screwed in properly. When everything is placed properly, you can start screwing in the motherboard to the desktop case. Be careful and take care not to touch the surface of the motherboard. And as always, make sure your ESD strap and mat are plugged in before beginning this step. Be very careful when preparing to put the CPU in. You'll notice my CPU has thermal paste already applied on it. Don't do this. I unfortunately didn't have any thermal paste or alcohol wipes to redo this application. When you insert your CPU, take a small pea-sized amount of thermal paste onto the center of the CPU. When you put on your heatsink, the thermal paste will spread evenly. If you end up applying too much thermal paste, it may spill out onto your motherboard, which is not good. To put the heatsink on, simply align it with the 4 holes and place the tabs in. This may be a little bit tricky, but with effort should go on smoothly. At this point, I decided to plug in the heatsink as it's not going to get in my way later. Your motherboard should have a clear indicator where things will be plugged in. At this point, I start to plug in everything into the motherboard. This won't take long as most things are labeled. Take your time and make sure that each cable is going in its proper place. If you don't do it right, your computer will not start up. But like I said, every single thing should have a label on it, allowing for easy completion of this task. The next step is installing your RAM. This is probably one of the easiest steps in completing this build. First, make sure your tabs are open, and then place the RAM stick in like so. Make sure you're holding it by its sides as to not damage it. It'll be very clear and distinct to put the RAM in. You'll notice that one side is longer than the other, and it fits in perfectly. It cannot be fitted in wrong. If you try fitting it in wrong, you could damage it, so be careful. You'll notice when the RAM sticks are inserted correctly, the tabs will close in on the RAM. The CD drive is simple enough. Insert it through the front and slide it in until it fits. You can use the green tabs to shut the disk drive in. For more reinforcement, I'll also screw it in as well. The last thing I'll be putting into the computer is the hard drives. The one hard drive is already placed in. All you have to do is place it in the slot and screw it in. The second hard drive is mounted in differently. It has a small compartment near the CD drive where it can be slid in and then clamped shut using the green tabs. The last thing I do is plug in all my power cables and SATA cables. Again, this process is fairly easy as everything should be labeled. The side panels are easy to put on. Just slide in place and screw them in so they are secure. As you can see, the computer turns on. In the next video, we will be going through the BIOS and setting up RAID, as well as installing Windows.